Welcome to the Logistics Viewpoints Podcast. Today, let's talk about webinars, and specifically, why most B2B webinars fail to create executive impact, even when registration numbers look strong, and why the issue isn't the format, it's the structure. Let's start with something that I've observed repeatedly. A company invests heavily in webinars, and they promote it aggressively. They generate registrations and prepare detailed slide decks, and they rehearse their product demonstrations. Internally, the program looks very successful. The marketing dashboards show a lot of activity, and attendance numbers appear healthy. But if you look at senior executive engagement, the pattern is consistent. There's a drop-off in the first 10 minutes. Why? Because webinars are structured around the company in most cases, not the problem. Enterprise leaders don't attend webinars to hear about you. They attend to understand what is changing, what risks are increasing, what trade-offs are emerging. If the opening frame centers on product architecture or your corporate backgrounder, the executive brain disengages almost immediately. Not out of impatience, but out of filtration. Here's the structural mistake. Most vendor-led webinars are designed as controlled messaging environments. The goal is to guide the narrative towards product strengths. But executives are highly attuned to narrative steering. When the discussion feels engineered to land on features, credibility erodes. And once that credibility erodes, attention follows. So let's be clear. Webinars themselves have not failed as a medium. Vendor-designed webinars have failed as executive forums. And that distinction really matters. The format itself works, it's scalable, it's accessible. It allows structured conversations, but only if it's framed correctly. Executive-facing webinars must begin with the issue, not the product. Such as, what is happening in the market? What structural forces are shaping decisions? Where are organizations miscalculating? Or what trade-offs are underappreciated? When a webinar starts there, executives stay because it respects how they think. There's also a sequencing problem. Many webinars delay the payload, the insight. They spend 10 or 15 minutes on context that feels promotional. And in today's attention environment, that delay can often be fatal. Values must appear early, and clarity must appear immediately. Otherwise, the session becomes background noise. I've seen well-structured, analyst-moderated webinars produce very, very different engagement patterns. The discussion remains disciplined. The framing stays anchored in the market. Sponsors contribute perspective, but within analytical guidelines and boundaries. That shift changes the perception, and it feels like true dialogue. Doesn't feel at all like a sales pitch. Another misconception is around ROI. Organizations often expect webinars to generate immediate sales pipeline. That expectation distorts the design of the webinar itself. Executive-facing webinars are influence vehicles, not short-term lead engines. They shape perception. They reposition brands within serious conversations. And perception shift compounds over time. In supply chain technology markets, buying cycles are long, stakeholders are numerous, and internal justification is rigorous. When executives repeatedly encounter a company within disciplined discussion, the familiarity builds inside that credibility frame, and that frame influences later evaluations. Not because the webinar sold harder, but because it was framed and positioned better. Timing reinforces this as well. Budget scrutiny is higher, technology investment risk is visible, and career exposure for decision makers is real. In this climate, promotional messaging is discounted quickly, but structured analysis holds attention. And that's the shift we all need to make in the webinar domain. The Logistics Viewpoints sponsored webinar program was designed with these realities in mind. Issue first framing, analyst-led moderation, clear structure, disciplined pacing. The objective is not to showcase features. It's to situate a sponsor within serious market analysis. And that positioning influences exactly how the sponsor is perceived later. And in enterprise markets, that perception determines access. If you're evaluating your webinar strategy, ask a direct question. Are we designing for registration volume, or are we designing for executive impact? Those are two very different design criteria. Volume optimizes for numbers, impact optimizes for credibility, and you rarely can maximize for both. Well-structured, analyst-moderated webinars do not guarantee short-term conversions, but they do increase the probability that your organization is taken seriously in strategic discussions. In enterprise supply chain markets, that probability shift matters. If this approach aligns with how you think about webinars, I encourage you to review the Logistics Viewpoints sponsored webinar program overview. It outlines the structure, the moderation model, and how executive-focused design differs from traditional vendor-driven approaches. You can find it on logisticsviewpoints.com. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Logistics Viewpoints Podcast.